Today, I want to talk about something really interesting that I noticed on the COD Zombies forum. It is this post right here by Rizzle25. I'm going to put a link to the thread down in the description for those who would like to read the post and see where it comes from. What he did was notice that there is a lot of similarities between the Nazi zombie Richtofen that we saw on The Giant and Shadows of Evil, and the Nazi zombie leader that we saw in the Call of Duty Zombies comic book. And when we look at these two characters, the connection is definitely there. You can look at their hats and say that they're both wearing the same exact hat. Now, you could say, okay, well, maybe they're just the same military rank, thus they wear the same hat. But then as you go and look at it further, they both have the same facial structure. They have this pentagonal shaped jawline, and in addition to that, they also have very similar eyes. There's yellow within a sea of pink. You can even look at the ears, and they're torn in very similar places. The jaws are similar. They both have some flesh that leads up to the nose. The left part of their chin is missing. There's a lot of similarities between these two characters. It's almost uncanny. You have to look at them and go, well, are they the same person? Is this leader zombie actually the Nazi zombie Richtofen that we saw within The Giant and Shadows of Evil? And if that's the case, why? Where did this image come from? So let's talk about this Richtofen zombie that we saw in The Giant and Shadows of Evil. We saw him as a jump scare, and then you could also see his face pop up every so often when you were teleporting. There was absolutely no explanation. One thing to take note of is that he's standing in the same exact spot that he stood in before he died in the intro. It's almost as if this is like an alternate reality before he got shot. And we've only known Richtofen to be a zombie one other time in the zombie storyline. This is on the map Buried. When Richtofen loses the Easter egg and Maxis is the winner of the endgame, what he does is place Richtofen's soul in the body of a zombie, which begs the question, could this be where the Nazi Richtofen, or perhaps the Nazi zombie, comes from? And as we look at the Nazi zombie, he also doesn't receive much of an explanation. He just shows up randomly in the comic book. Richtofen, however, does describe him as the next evolution. And this is Richtofen when he's in control of the Ether, inside Stuhlinger's head. And he's this leader zombie, which could be explained by him being the next evolution. However, if you can imagine, there's a bit of a plot hole going on right here, or at least some contradicting story elements. If we look at the ending to Buried and we say Maxis was the winner, and then he put Richtofen in the body of a zombie, and that's where this leader zombie comes from. Maybe he then still retained some of Richtofen's qualities, and that's why this weird image of a zombie Richtofen is floating about. It's being transported and being displaced through time and space. That's an explanation. But then if you consider that Richtofen is a voice who's in control in the comic books, it wouldn't make sense for it to take place after Maxis's endgame, which means that Richtofen's soul was never placed into the body of a zombie. Now this could all be happening before Buried, but then again that still begs the question, where does the zombie Richtofen come from? Now I'm not gonna lie, the zombie storyline is riddled with plot holes, and you could easily say that some person, or just for some random reason, the zombie Richtofen was transported out of the Maxis endgame and brought back in time, and then also found itself being transported through time and space in The Giant. And maybe that's why we see it randomly through a jump scare and through a teleporter, because it's also moving through the same fabric of space and time that our characters are going through. That could be an explanation. It's a little bit of a crazy one. It doesn't give us much to draw from. And I think the real question is why? Why did Treyarch do this? You could look at this and say, well, maybe Treyarch included the jump scare as a hint to what's coming in the comic books, and that could be a good explanation. But we'll probably end up having to dive deeper into the comic books as we receive more issues in the coming months. I definitely want an explanation for the zombie Richtofen, and I think we're going to get one at least by the end of the saga. And maybe later on, it will be confirmed that this Nazi zombie is Richtofen. Because remember, it's not confirmed. They definitely look alike. And maybe it's just a coincidence, so don't just rule out that possibility. That still may be the case, that this is just a coincidence and that they're actually not the same person. Because why would Richtofen spawn in a zombie version of himself and refer to it as the next evolution? Richtofen, remember, is still in control in the comic book world, so there's a lot of contradiction going on with this zombie being Richtofen. And that's what I wanted to point out. I definitely think this is a really good theory. I would actually think it's cool if this zombie leader was Richtofen. I think that'd give it a little bit more backstory and make it fit in better. However, there are some holdups with this theory. That's going to wrap things up with this video. What do you guys think? Do you definitely think this is Richtofen, or do you think it's actually somebody else? I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say. I'm going to wrap this up, though. Have a wonderful day, and bye.